This is the Guard Room Podcast, Episode 4, with Jordan Regalado and me, Ben Boyle. Good morning, Jordan.
Hey.
Today's guest is Matthew McGee. He's originally from Company S1. Matthew ran on the Corps Marathon team sophomore year and has been a member of Recon Company since sophomore year. He's also an active member of the Texas A&M Warfighting Society. He was the first sergeant of Company S1 and now serves as the 5th Battalion Commander. Matt is the recipient of the Corps Silent Leadership Award and the 2023-2024 Most Outstanding Battalion Commander. Off the quad, Matt is a muster host and plays guitar and sings for his church's music team. After college, he will commission into the Marines and hopefully into infantry. Matt McGee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning, Ben.
I've been excited for this one. I'm not going to lie. I think we've kind of, I've known about you for a while, just from the special unit space.
Yeah.
I've heard good things. I feel like it'd be good getting a chance to sit down and talk.
Good. Very flattering. Looking forward to it.
But yeah, I just want to start off the quick bio, but would love to hear more about you. Get some of your story out there, where you came from, how you got to A&M, and then to the Corps.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in a military family, so my dad was in the Marine Corps, which definitely had a big influence on me. He was in the Corps of Cadets. He met my mom here at A&M, and all three of my older sisters came to college here as well. So I'm the last one, and I'm going to graduate this coming December. I grew up in Bryan, kind of was there for about the last 15 years or so, I guess. Hard to believe it's been that long. But A&M was the only school I applied to. I picked Company S1 kind of on a whim, but I knew there were some good people there and had a great experience in S1. Being their first sergeant was an awesome privilege. And then, I've been battalion commander for 5th Battalion this last year. You already said kind of some of my interests and fun things I like doing. I enjoy reading as well, hanging out with friends, going to the chicken every now and then. So yeah, it's been a good 4 years of my life, probably the best, and I'm excited for the next chapter of it in the Marines.
Were you the first one from your siblings to join the Corps?
Yes. So my dad was in the Corps, and none of my sisters joined. And yeah, I was the first one.
Which outfit was your dad in?
My dad was in the band. I think he was in ABAT and then transferred to BBAT, or I might have it backwards, but one of those two.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So, out of curiosity, I think everybody in leadership has a unique story of kind of how they got there. I had a bunch of upperclassmen really pour into me, which was what led me to putting out for Corps leadership. So I'm curious about you. What, going into junior year, prompted you to put up for first sergeant, and then after that, once we make the leap to senior year, go into staff and take it over 5th Battalion?
Yeah, it was a bit of a journey. Definitely. I loved the Corps, and I knew I wanted to be involved as years went on. I kind of eat it up, the military, the discipline, and all that stuff. And being first sergeant, all three, the two first sergeants I'd seen before me were really strong-willed, strong people, had a lot of experience and grew a lot of confidence in the role. And so I wanted that. I wanted to stay in my unit. In fact, I did not want to go to staff. If you'd asked me all the way up through most of junior year, I would have said, I want to be first sergeant, and then I want to be CO. I want to stay with S1, stay with my guys, build those relationships, just kind of keep pushing. And then somewhere around senior year, the beginning of it, I guess really it would have been halfway through junior year when leadership applications were. I just started thinking more seriously about that next echelon up, which would have been regimental commander then, and then when they reorganized the Corps, it became the battalion commander position, just one above the company level. And that was, I prayed a lot about that and talked to a lot of people about it. I just kind of came to the conclusion that, first off, there were other better candidates for company commander in S1, and I thought I was pretty uniquely suited to kind of just maybe one higher position, a place where I could still interact with people, with all the freshmen and the sophomores and everybody in the unit, but at the same time kind of have a little bit of a bigger swing in what the Corps was doing, and be able to fly top cover for some companies, not in a deceitful way or anything like that, but just to, I knew I had a pretty good handle on what it meant to develop people and care for people, and I was going to Marine OCS that coming summer. and I wanted to be able to kind of bring that to a larger set of people. So hope that doesn't sound too narcissistic, but I wanted to expand my influence a little bit and kind of spread my wings and let some of the guys in S1 run S1, because I knew they would do a great job without me there anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I had a somewhat similar experience, just being like, first sergeant was really cool, best experience of my Corps career. It was difficult, but would totally do it again. Very, very rewarding experience, and I said, I think I'm going to move on to something else senior year, because there's a lot of guys that are really, really qualified to do the CO position in my outfit. So, between outfit leadership and battalion leadership, what are some of those, and obviously, I'm from the wings, on the regiment side of things, what are some of those key differences that you've seen in leadership, I guess, responsibilities at an outfit level versus at a staff level, and how you've managed, like, hey, I grew up in this one outfit, this whole culture here that I'm used to, this is like my perception of how the Corps runs, and then, okay, now I'm on staff my senior year, and it's time to take a little bit of a larger perspective to work a little bit from the top level and not just focused on that day-to-day grind.
That is a great question that I could probably spend an hour answering, just because I feel like I've learned a lot in that area, because there's a balance to be had. When you come into a position, like as a battalion commander like me, you've been put into that position because you had something of value to bring to the battalion. So being raised in Company S1, I had things of value from Company S1 that I could bring to the battalion. So in a sense, I want to make the battalion more like Company S1. And there's nothing wrong with that, in a sense. But at the same time, I had to recognize there's 3 companies here. They've all got different strengths and weaknesses. Some may have different ways of doing things that are not wrong. And I don't need to try and fix that if it's not broken, if that makes sense. So they don't have to all be remade in S1's image, but I do want to kind of draw on some of the strengths that I've been given and the reason I've been put in this position to make the whole battalion a better place. So I guess that may not really be much of an answer, but those are some considerations. Some things I learned were try to look at things through new eyes. That's hard. You come in with biases, but you can get some help with that through counsel, talking to different people from different units. You can vary your staff when you're choosing your staff. Don't pick everybody from the same unit. Of course, it's merit based, but consider that other people have different strengths and weaknesses. And then I think also just trying to get back to the fundamentals and the basics of what it means, what we're here for. That's why commander's intent is so important. This idea of you have to understand what your commander, for me the regimental and corps commander, 2 people I answer to, you have to understand what their intent is for the Corps of Cadets, and then interpret everything that you do through that lens. So you're not ever just doing, hey, this is what we did last year, let's just do it again. As much as possible, you're looking at it with new eyes through this intent, and how do we best accomplish this? Sometimes that was the way S1 did things, which is typically very rigid, kind of Marine Corps-esque, which the whole regiment is that way, but very, very much strong adherence to the rules and things like that. And sometimes that was more the way P2 did things. They had a very much, hey, let's do what makes sense attitude. That doesn't mean they went outside of the bounds, but they would question things, and they would look, hey, the way we're doing this just doesn't make sense. It's like, you know what, you're right. Is there a way we can do that just is more commonsensical? That, well, what are the second and third order effects of doing that? So asking questions, being inquisitive, remembering your intent, going back to the fundamentals of leadership, those are all, and getting counsel. Those are all good ways to help get rid of your blindness, and that comes from just being part of one unit and then being able to effectively lead 3 or 10 or 20 or 40 different units. Another thing I'll mention, there's a kind of a goofy aspect to the Corps where all of the seniors have the same amount of experience, but 1 will be put into the Corps commander position, and 4 will be put into major unit positions, and then you'll have a bunch of minor unit commanders and then outfit commanders. They all have the same amount of experience. Ostensibly, they're put into those higher or lower positions based off of skill and aptitude. In reality, it might just be based off of interest, but it's a combination of both. So you generally will have, yes, your most outstanding, most apt senior as the Corps commander. But you have to understand that since they all have the same amount of experience, it's not like the military where your battalion commander has an extra 3 to 6 years of experience on your company commander and is that much more adept at handling it. So one thing I experienced is, yes, I'm a battalion commander and I have 3 company commanders answering to me, but really they're my peers. And I don't know how to be a good battalion commander. My regimental commander doesn't know how to be a good regimental commander. We can gain some experience, we can learn a few things, but we are not going to be organizational experts because we're not professionals, because we've only been doing it for 3 years, and this is our first year in the role, and then we're going to be gone. So that was one thing I had to keep in mind too, is it's not always so much about how to be a good battalion commander as it is how to be a good leader and then attempt to apply that across your battalion. Because the skills of leadership, the fundamentals don't change. The experience does, and that's just something we have to live with in the Corps of Cadets. Hey, you just don't have that experience.
That's so good. You mentioned earlier getting a bit of an outside perspective on just different styles of leadership, different styles of outfit culture, and how it's like, hey, this may be a little bit more applicable in one area or not in another. What would you say to a current sophomore or like those early months of the semester junior who's going out and putting up for leadership or sergeant major, where they haven't had that experience yet of getting to see the Corps, right? As a black belt, you've still got that that outfit focus that they haven't necessarily moved to a larger perspective. What advice would you have for someone trying to get that larger perspective on how to lead well and to make the most of everybody's experience in the Corps, not just their outfit experience?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so specifically advice for a junior sophomore kind of leaving their unit and going to a higher echelon.
Or as like, hey, I'm a rising first sergeant, I want to make sure we're doing things right here.
I see.
Adapting.
Okay, I think my first piece of advice, and this is kind of a fun thing. When I was going out as a first sergeant, ending my time as a first sergeant, it was the end of the year, and I called all the rising juniors. They were sophomores. I kind of had a little heart-to-heart meeting with them. I've tried to do something similar every year, but this was probably the most valuable because it was the most recent one. And I think I had 2 gifts for them to kind of make a point, and one of them was a salt shaker. And I had a myriad of meanings through that salt shaker, but the main thing I told them was, I want y'all to take this and like leave it on your desk over the coming year, or not, use it to salt your food if you want, but if you think there's value in this, leave it on your desk and let it remind you to take everything with a grain of salt. Pretty simple, we say it a lot of times, but what it means is think critically about things, be inquisitive about things, and always ask like the why behind things, and always not skeptical or cynical, but don't just take what people say for granted. Everyone has a different, key to success, and this goes to any listener here too, and Ben and Jordan in the room as well. Like, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I have some experience and I know some things, and there's other people with more experience, and there's a lot of things I don't know. So there may be some value here, there may not. Take it with a grain of salt, season it, think about it, question it. That's probably the number one thing, and that goes for everything. Hey, our outfit does greeting on the bulkhead. S1 does greeting on the bulkhead every year. So the fish, they wake up in the morning. They usually have a few minutes for hygiene or whatever during the call cycle, and then before we fall out, they get out on the bulkhead and they greet. And there are certain practices and ritual, maybe you could call it, associated with that. Things we do it in a specific way we do it. Those probably came about for a reason and a purpose, but we shouldn't just assume that. So everything that is done, you have to make sure you question, why do we do it that way? Is it accomplishing something good? Is it accomplishing something positive? And if it is, great. And if it's not, well, you should consider ending that practice, especially if it brings about a risk or harm, whether physical, mental, psychological, or just the harm of doing something meaningless over and over again and wasting time. So take it with a grain of salt. That's my number one. I think the second piece of advice I gave them, and the second item I gave them was maybe not quite as applicable to your question, but still a good, fun story. And this is not my idea. This came from Colonel Riley, the former professor of naval science here. I gave him a styrofoam cup because I remember him telling a story, I think at his retirement, where he was talking about how when you're a colonel, you walk into this place and some, private or corporal hands you a mug full of coffee, and they treat you kind of like royalty, and, whether it's at a conference or whatever, and then you retire, and you come back and all you get is a styrofoam cup. His point being, I think, is just hold what you have loosely, like recognize that what you have is a privilege, and that privilege will be gone at some point, and all you rate is a styrofoam cup. I don't know, there's probably a lot of messages he meant to say about that. The one I take out of it is stay humble, especially to like a rising first sergeant. You have the privilege of leading and being more visible, but you're one of many. So stay humble. Don't think you're necessarily better, or that you know better. Stay humble. Ask questions. I ran my suck for a long time there, but I think that kind of answered the question.
That's so good. I'm stealing the styrofoam cup one. That's a good story there. So you don't have to get into any outfit drama or any core drama, but I would love to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, we only have a year here. I wouldn't say it's impossible to do everything you want in a year, but the list of things that we want to do in the Corps is usually longer than things we can accomplish in 1 year. So what are some things that, we're a week out from final review, things that you're like, man, it'd be fun to have gotten to do that. But on the more serious side, some things in the leadership in the battalion or on the outfit side of like, man, this was something that I would love to have pushed for, but I'm gonna leave that to the next year's command team. I'm gonna encourage them to pursue this and really just work to better the unit and better the Corps through XYZ thing that I didn't get to.
Man, that's a humbling question to answer. Because I can look back and think, man, I feel like I did about a tenth of what I wanted to do in terms of accomplishing, forward progress. And a lot of that had to do with critical thinking. If you were privileged to be on the command team this last year, you saw a lot of the memes I had sent in the Corps meme chat. Anyway, and one of those was one of kind of like, a guy starting out the year thinking, I'm going to bring so much change, and then kind of progresses, and by the end of it, he's like, yeah, I'll just copy and paste last year's stuff. Hey, a lot of things, when school hits, you end up copy and pasting. And it's not good, and you shouldn't, but you do because you have to cope. So, same thing with me. There were some changes. I wanted to make the battalion really have a battalion identity. And there were like 10 things I wanted to do associated with that. Activities, guest speakers, competitions. Well, we had a few competitions. I took one step towards that. Didn't take the 10 that I wanted. So that kind of leads into a little piece of advice for future leaders, whether or not you're in a position of leadership, like an official one. Pick a few things you want to change and make them happen, but dream small in that sense, because organizational change is like an inertia thing. The more weight you have, the bigger the organization, the harder to bring about change. So your fire team, you'll probably be able to lead that however you want it. Your company will have a lot of established procedures and stuff, and you may be able to change 3 big things about how that company looks and set some new direction. If you're the Corps commander, you will have to focus on a lot of things, but also you'll want to make sure you follow through on at least your kind of big 3, I would say. 3 is a good number to pick of like things you want to do or change. So those are, that was kind of generic. Specifically me, I wish that I had put a lot more effort into just knowing things about my people, about the guys in my battalion. One of the best things I did was have all the freshmen and sophomores give me a bio of themselves in the first couple of weeks. It was great. It let me kind of go over it and get to know people's names. Didn't work nearly as hard at that as I should have. I think it is an excellent aspiration for every leader to know things about their people. And the lower you are, the easier this is, the lower in echelon. Fire team leader, even as a sophomore, if I could go back and tell my sophomore self something, it'd be like, by the first 3 weeks of school, you got like 4, maybe 5 fish. Know which of them, have parents that are divorced. Know which of them have siblings and how many. Know which of them have pets and love them, and know if they're dating someone and if it's long distance or close. Not because you want to curry favor or become excessively familiar, but if you want to lead them the best, then you have to know them. And you've got to know their strengths and weaknesses and what's keeping them from performing. And anyway, so even as a battalion commander, wish I'd done more of that. Maybe a little less dreaming and a little more just knocking on people's doors would have been good. And what's very humbling about that is I remember the previous battalion commander telling me the same thing. Our regimental commander, Ethan Hasty, told me something very similar. So it's an easy one to overlook, but it's a really important one, and time goes really fast. What else was in that question that I missed? You said some fun and funny ones.
That was a great answer. You could leave it at that.
Okay.
I would be totally like.
I do wish personally that I had played more 42 over my time in the Corps of Cadets, and I have one more semester here, and that's like one of the top item lists of things I want to do. Is like I want to play a lot more 42. That is an amazing game, and it's very good ball.
No, I'm laughing because last year I was talking with one of my class of 23 zips that I really looked up to, and I was like, "Hey man, you just walked final review. What are you feeling like you wish you would have done more of?" And he was like, "To be honest, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this one. Academics, yes, keep your academics squared away, but also, I should have gone to the chicken more."
Yeah, that's funny.
Okay, good to know.
It sounds funny, but it's about those relationships. Like I said, like the relationships are what you'll take out of here. You will take. I mean, yes, you'll take a degree out of here. That's the most important thing. But, and the chicken's a fun place to develop those if you're sober or roughly.
I had a sophomore reach out to me, a rising first sergeant, who said, "I know it gets difficult to do things once the school year gets started because of just the momentum of how much we're trying to accomplish and how much just between balancing school and core activities, it just gets to be almost impossible to try and set stuff up for success. Obviously you can do it, it just takes a lot of work." So he was asking, like, what can I be doing over the summer as a rising first sergeant? We'll expand that to rising commander, rising command team. What can I be doing to set myself up and my unit up the best over the summer so that I can hit the school year full stride, full steam ahead?
Man, you don't know what you don't know, and that's what makes it so hard. But over the summer, as a rising first sergeant specifically, try to assess the strengths and the weaknesses of your unit. If you can, get an outside perspective, and then think about some controls associated with that. But also understand your lane. The first sergeant has certain things that are very much in their lane. You hear the phrase "good order and discipline" a lot. Maybe that phrase isn't as helpful because it's like, what is good order and discipline? Well, here's one I picked as a first sergeant: making sure people are on time to morning activity. That was one I harped on. Any of my buddies know that I maybe harped on it too much, but it was just the thing I picked. And you can't always just pick and choose things, but like pick a few things that you can be consistent in enforcing. As far as the planning over the summer goes, the first sergeant should know what's going on with planning, but the CO and the XO and the training officer and the chains, those are going to be mostly the ones who plan and execute. The first sergeant and the NCO chain, platoon sergeants and squad leaders, they grease the gears to make sure that stuff can be accomplished, I guess. So the first sergeant should be thinking probably less about where do I want the outfit to be at the end of the year. He should be aware of what the CO wants when it comes to that. And he should definitely have some goals, but his goals are more related to the internal functioning of the unit. So one thing I would maybe recommend for a rising first sergeant, the Corps is not great at conflict resolution. So rising first sergeant, make a conflict resolution plan for your unit. This may be too generic, and it probably cycles in a lot to like discipline and counseling, what that looks like. But there are actual methods, like in the real world, used for conflict resolution, and there are procedures, things like mediation and litigation And if you look up like project management or pretty much if you just look up conflict management, I guarantee you'll find resources on this. The Marine Corps has its own ones. It's the idea of, hey, let's try to prevent infighting and gossip and quarreling in the unit by having a more set method for dealing with disagreements. This takes some maturity on everybody's part, but maybe if you have it in writing or you actually discuss it in the early days, I don't know, maybe it could help a little bit. Having the understanding of, hey, if I have a problem with somebody else in the unit, instead of talking to all my buddies about it, I'm going to go to them first, and if they will not, I could talk about that even more, but if they will not fix themselves, then I'm going to go to their chain of command, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you can come up with a good conflict resolution plan, but I think the first sergeant specifically, that would be a great thing to plan over the summer and have ready to go. It'll help build the maturity of your unit. It'll prevent infighting and quarreling, which takes up so much time and energy, as I'm sure everyone is aware. That's the outfit drama. It's because people won't deal with conflict in a mature, adult way. The first sergeant should be the one to facilitate that. That's what I think.
Wow, I wish I had heard that as a rising first sergeant.
Me too.
That would have solved,
Believe it.
that would have
Me
solved
too.
so many problems as a rising first sergeant. Getting out, commissioning, going to TBS, right? What are some things? What are some things that you're taking from the Corps that you're like, I can see this lesson learned getting a lot of practical use in the Marine Corps? And I know that is
That's so open.
that is like, there's so many different directions we could go with that, but
That's a great question.
And there's so many things like on my mind that I want to bring up, and I guess I'll just focus on some that have kind of cropped up recently. We had a Marine officer advisor, Captain Getter, the first few years I was here, and he had a phrase he would use in his leadership development classes, and the phrase was officers, well, not necessarily officers, but the phrase was work saturated but never overwhelmed. And his short little lesson that he would teach on that is, as an officer and in the Corps and such, you should and you will always be work saturated. You're always going to have things to do. You're going to be going from one thing to the next, but never overwhelmed. And that was kind of like you never can allow yourself to reach the point where you can just no longer function because you have so many things on your plate. And when I first heard that, I think my understanding, it was very confusing to me because I was like, well, how do I control the intake? If I just have too many things coming in, then I'm going to be overwhelmed, right? Well, no, his point in that was it's not so much about the intake of things, it's how you deal with it. And as an officer, this is really important. And this is what I'm definitely going to take into TBS, is if your Marines see that you are just breaking down from stress because you have too much on your plate, that is going to severely degrade their confidence in you and like the effectiveness of your unit. So being work saturated and never overwhelmed, that's not about the intake of things coming across your desk. You probably can't control that. You can mitigate it by delegating some things, but you probably can't control that. It's really just about attacking it in a manner that is calm. Work saturated. Well, let's start organizing these things. There's skills you can do to develop that, but that idea of work saturated but never overwhelmed, that had an effect on how I responded to people when they would ask me how I'm doing. Well, a lot of times I guess I would say things like busy or tired and things like that, and we all do it. But think about that before you respond to something. If it's a subordinate asking you how you're doing and you break down and dump on them, that's going to affect that subordinate's confidence in you and like probably their mood. If you can respond instead in a way of like confidence and calmness, not deceitful, but have an attitude of, you know what, I'm not overwhelmed. I can handle this. I can make this work. I may fail at some things, but I'm gonna attack it with a good attitude anyway. That attitude of work saturated but not overwhelmed is something I'm gonna take with me into TBS. Another one I've been thinking about recently is Coke's advice. When it comes to being an ethical person, the ideas of be as true to a trust repose as the needle to the pole, and stand by the right, even to the sacrifice of life itself. Those values of like fortitude and steadfastness, reliability, dependability, the Corps of Cadets really challenges you, because it's like, are you going to still be there for your people when you have a challenging academic schedule this week? That's tough, and we've all failed at that. But the Corps of Cadets puts you up to that challenge, and it kind of prepares you for it. So I know when it comes to the Marine Corps, there's going to be weeks where it's like, man, I'm work saturated. Man, I've got exams coming up. In the basic school, there'll be exams, but that doesn't preclude me from checking in on the guys around me and the guys and gals, under me, over me. Maybe less at the basic school because they'll all be peers, but still, it's important to recognize that you have a responsibility to those around you, and be true to that trust reposed. That can take a number of things. That can be a friendship. That can be a commitment or a duty. That phrase is going to echo in my mind for a long time, for sure. And then what else from Koch's advice? There's at least one other phrase. Let honor be your guiding star in your dealings with your superiors, fellows, and all. That phrase right there, something we said a lot this year and maybe didn't understand. I don't think I'm going to try to tackle that here. But suffice it to say, Koch's advice is something I will take with me leaving here. And there are other things, just the examples of some of my peers and people that led me, things that I'm going to try to emulate, both COs and not. I had a platoon commander who, in the Corps, who taught me a lot of things about resilience and about having fun, and but also about being serious when the time counted. And I'm going to take that with me. So, all right, moving on.
Jordan, do you have anything you want to add?
Generally, what's been your interaction with the wing group commanders, your equivalent on the wing side, and why do you think our experience in the wing is so much different than people's experience in S1?
Gosh, no, I haven't interacted with the group commanders much. I can see some stuff from the wings, and don't get me wrong in the things I'm about to say, because I am about to go into the Marine Corps, and I love the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is very different from the Air Force. Some of the cultural differences in the Corps stem from that, from the service branch difference. And not all those differences are necessarily bad. It blows my mind when I see, I saw one of my buddies in the wing the other day was like walking in uniform on his phone, and he's like, that's allowed in the Air Force. And I was like, what? And it just blew my mind. Hey, that's not necessarily like evil. It's just very different. So some of those differences, there's kind of maybe a more relaxed aspect in the wing with respect to some practices that the Marines and Navy would not be as relaxed with. And that's kind of vague, but did that make sense? Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe I need to expand on it.
Makes 100% sense.
Okay.
It makes it
so is there value in it? Is there not? Maybe not. But that's a good thing to think critically about. Is this thing negatively affecting my unit? Maybe y'all are gonna laugh at me. Everyone's gonna laugh at me about this one. But I think drill is way more important than the Corps of Cadets thinks it is. And I see the Air Force drilling all the time. I don't see the same care and attention to it. Maybe to the technical aspects of like when I call things, but in the Marines and the OCS, and you ask any like senior NCO, drill is a very important part of like the Marine and Navy culture, and it's not just window dressing. There is more to it than just ritual and tradition. There is something about, and it's really hard to put my finger on, and it's in. You can look up the purposes of drill, and it talks about it. There's definitely an element of moving a people around in an organized manner, but also there's an element of personal confidence building that comes from leading a unit. If you ever do rifle drill, there's weapons handling confidence that comes through rifle drill. But I really think there's something to just having pride in being together with something that comes out of like really good drill and ceremonies. And I think, not that every unit in the regiment takes drill and ceremony seriously, but there is still a hearkening back to that kind of idea. Other things I would say, maybe, at least in my regiment, we had Master Sergeant Anderson the first couple years as our training officer, and he was absolute terror the first couple years. Well, he was always a terror if you got on that side of him. But like the first few years, he came in hot out of the Marine Corps. Yeah, maybe I need to be careful what I say here. Not that he didn't do anything bad or wrong. He was very aggressive, and the cadets in 1st Regiment were not ready for that. Maybe nobody is ready for an aggressive Master Sergeant Anderson. You guys know. He's
I'm well aware.
So he came in and he laid down the law in a lot of ways. He stomped his foot down and he mellowed out after a year. I think he had maybe some conversations and realized, hey, I need to let these guys to some degree fail and succeed on their own. But he cared, and I definitely saw that. And he drilled into us the ideas of lead by example and follow the standard and things like that. That definitely had a big effect. That idea of leading by example, of leaders eat last, and this may be in the wings, and it's just hard for me to know, but there is very much a sense around the regiment that even as like a one moon goon, a zip in a unit, I would rather, take the worst possible punishment or fate you can think of. I would rather that happen to me than do something that would harm or let down my fish. I think that is across the Corps, but there's definitely a very serious aspect in the regiment of like you're about to be in a profession of arms, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're a DNC, but lead by example, set that example, eat last, lay down your life for your unit, lay down your life for your Marines and your sailors. I think that permeates the air around me, at least over there. There was one other thing I was going to say. I do think that there are other strengths and weaknesses, like I said. The wing probably does like 90% of the community service from the Corps of Cadets. I think I can pretty confidently say that. And that's significant. That is not insignificant, and it is significant. So there's a give and take to being on different sides of the quad. I think the regiment is also more Corps of Cadets focused, maybe. There's not nearly as much off-quad involvement, so good and bad. On the good side, I think they put a lot, maybe more energy and effort into inter-Corps things, but not the intra-Corps things. That is probably a very limited perspective. Like I said, I don't interact much with the wing side.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just when you talk to someone with, in S1 or any regiment, or even if you look at brigades, just our experience is so vast, and I think for some it's positive, and so that's a negative. I mean, I don't know how Ben feels personally, but it's like when we moved from a regiment outfit, essentially, Mass is a wing outfit, to a wing outfit. It just the culture is just completely different, and I don't know. I think I missed the previous experience and whatnot. But I mean, it's also something that's kind of had different goals and values that led that drive.
I wish we did a better job of presenting that to people we recruit, because I think one of my experiences coming out of 4 was our retention was really, really low, but not necessarily because they were bad for the Corps, just that they were not good for our unit. And there was I would talk to some of the guys who punched and be like, you shouldn't have punched. You would have done really well in XYZ other outfit. And I don't know if we do a good enough job marketing. Like, hey, if you want that structured, discipline, borderline Marine Corps experience, then you should look at the regiments versus, hey, if you want to be involved off the quad and you want to have a still a good Corps experience, good family experience. There's tons of places to do that in the wings, but the wings are also, they're a little bit more community service and outward outside of the Corps focus, and the brigade is entirely focused on the Army, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but I just don't think we do enough of that to the incoming prospects, because we're so focused on join my outfit, and we just, I don't know, we get everyone, and not everyone's meant to be in your outfit. Maybe they're meant to be in somewhere else.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the wing can have a lot of good things going for it if it focuses on some good examples of guys who there are people I think of in the Air Force, like actual Air Force, like retired maybe, that I think of very highly. And they are not the same as the Marines that I think of who are retired, who I also think of very highly. A prime example would be the professor I'm about to go to his class in about 30 minutes here. Lance Clark in the Civil Engineering Department is a retired Air Force colonel. The man is relaxed. The man is casual in a lot of senses, but he is sharp as a really sharp thing. He has very fun-loving eyes, but they are very piercing eyes. You know, he has a very disarming personality, but it's also a very like perceptive personality. In the first 2 weeks of class, he knew, out of about a 50-person class, he pretty much knew everybody's first name and like something about them, and he's able to reference that and speak to that all the time, and it just shows this amazing care and like investment that he has in us. And I'm like, man, I want to be like that guy. But it's different from some of the Marines you'll see. And I would say generally the retired Marines I know have a very high standard of how they present themselves even in public. My dad won't go out to something like a Corps review or something unless he's wearing some sort of slacks and a polo at least. And that's a holdover from the Marine Corps. They have a very rigid standard of how you present yourself, whether you're in or out of uniform, and it's a life change. I think the Air Force has that in a different manner. I think Lance Clark took out of the Air Force that, hey, I need to get to know my people and make sure they are comfortable coming to me and talking to me, and he got a different aspect of leadership. A lot of that goes across all the services and could across the entire Corps of Cadets, and then some of it is going to be specific to service. So I would say don't try to be the regiment. You won't be. But also, like, yeah, sure, pull on some of those threads that, hey, we're doing this thing and it's actually bad. Well, how does the reg deal with that? Well, maybe we'll fix it that way. Maybe not. I don't know. Drill and ceremonies, man. There's something to it. If you like S1's big on drill, and I don't think that's coincidence. I don't think it's entirely causation, but like there's a correlation for sure. People will say I'm crazy.
No, I get it. You got anything else you want to add? I know we could sit here and
I'll
talk
just
forever,
throw
but
out
I
some
wanna-
resources for people. Some of the biggest things I've drawn on. I've sent this out to a lot of guys in the battalion. I don't know if you can find this by Googling it, but you can definitely find it if you shoot me an email. There is a speech given back in 1917 from a major, I think it was Stephen Bach, to the graduating class of Army lieutenants at Fort Sheridan. And I'm going to pull it up real quick so I get the name of it right. It's about a 4-page speech. It's a PDF format. And it's some of the most profound advice on leadership I've ever read. It's kind of been a guiding star, if you will, to me during my senior year here. I think it's called, let me pull it up. But while it's coming up on my laptop, which is overheating, a couple other easy resources to find are General Lejeune. General Lejeune was a commandant of the Marine Corps, the 13th commandant of the Marine Corps. It's spelled Lejeune. And there's 2 letters of his. One is relationships between officers and men. That's what it's called. If you look up General Lejeune's letter regarding relationships between officers and men, you will find it. The other is his letter called Kindly and Just. Both of those are letters that he wrote, and they're about 1 page, and they just contain a wealth of information on how officers and enlisted men should interact, what the officer's role is, and really what the purpose of leadership development in the Marine Corps is. And I think those are pertinent to everyone. The other is, Major C.A. Bach's Giving Farewell Instructions, Leadership Speech to Graduating Student Officers. It's called Giving Farewell Instructions. Very profound. I would also refer anyone looking to gain insight and wisdom on life in general and leadership to the Proverbs in the Bible. I read them a lot, and they have definitely echoed in my mind a lot this last year. So familiarize yourselves with the principles therein, and they will guide you through a lot of tricky situations. That's pretty much it.
That's good, man. All right, last question. You're talking to Fish Matt McGee, not like generic fish in the Corps, Fish you. What advice do you have for Fish Matt McGee walking into the Corps?
I think I would say something along the lines of, Fish McGee, you are stepping into a honorable and noble place. It is not at all what you think it will be. You are not going to learn the lessons you think you're going to learn. Most of the ones you learn will probably not be in the classroom. And I'd say you're probably going to learn a lot more about what is right and what is wrong and how to make the discernment between the two. But for now, don't compromise on what you know is right. Don't change who you are just to fit someone's mold. And seriously, know no other talisman of success than labor. Like, that phrase, man. Don't ever try to win positions, power, friends, money, fame through anything except your hard work and your honest effort. I think those things I would say to Fish McGee.
Well, Matt, thanks for coming on the podcast.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate that. It was a great conversation, and this is one that I can't wait to send to some black belts. I think they could really use some of your advice.
Take it all with a grain of salt.
Good deal.
But thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, man.